A few years ago, the idea of Spain not being in Eurovision was unthinkable. Now it's the reality. This is a country that participated in the last 64 contests, that has a fan community larger than almost any other, that is both famous and infamous for its passion and its energy. And now they've willingly walked out the door and left the contest behind. That's because they're one of the 5 countries this year that are boycotting in protest against the participation of Israel. In any case, this withdrawal left the Spanish broadcaster with a choice, whether to abandon not only Eurovision, but the format in its entirety, or to give their national selection, BenidormFest, the chance to stand on its own 2 feet as a competition without the incentive of Eurovision for the winner. They chose the latter. As a result, we have a unique case study in what can be done when a national selection loses the contest that it's selecting for. There are a lot of countries that can be learning lessons from what Spain has done, because this year's BenidormFest was a triumph that deserves a closer look, and we're going to do that today. Every competition needs a prize, and a show like this needs something to attract attention to it, both from artists and from the public. A Eurovision participation is either an incentive or a repellent, depending on who you ask. Without that, you'd need something else in its place, and luckily the Spanish broadcaster had a few things in mind. A €100,000 prize was introduced for the winner, as well as $50,000 for the songwriters, as well as a series of other potential awards. Spotify sponsored one which would give one artist the opportunity to record in one of their studios in Stockholm, and Univision offered the opportunity to work with Latin music producers and promotion through their channels. What's notable here is that all of these things were put into motion before the withdrawal from Eurovision happened, which on one hand is a sign of general good management and a sign of doing the right things to improve your selection, but also on the other may be an indication that the broadcaster saw which way the wind was blowing ahead of the decision. Another change was the introduction of Sergio Jaén as the festival's creative director. He's well known now, especially in Eurovision circles, and has been frequently credited in videos on this channel and elsewhere for being one of the best creative minds involved with the contest at the moment. What we ended up seeing, partly as a result of this appointment, was possibly the best produced and best staged BenidormFest since the festival returned as a Eurovision selection 5 years ago. At the very least, it was a drastic upgrade from the last couple of editions, which were quite underwhelming. I even made a video about this last year about the 2025 edition. This is the closest equivalent we've ever had to a national final hitting the gym and getting a revenge fit after a breakup. At the same time, we should ask the question more generally, was this experiment a success? Often with national selections, it's easy to fall towards simply saying, oh, there were X number of viable songs for Eurovision, and the stagings and production were good. I am sometimes guilty of doing this. Given that this didn't select for Eurovision, the goalposts need to move a bit. We're going to need to devote some time later into this video into defining what success even is here outside of the usual framework. As always though, there is time to talk about some of the songs, and we're going to focus in on those that came in the top 3, starting with 3rd place, which was Rosalinda Galan with her song Mata Ora.
It's Mata Ora beat. Nadie pronuncia mi nombre. Tengo fama de pecadora.
Some songs are quite abstract in their subject matter. Sometimes they are a little more specific. This one is very much the latter because it's a dramatic retelling of the story of the character Carmen from the opera of the same name. Even if you haven't seen it, I'm 100% sure you're familiar with it and have heard some of the music from it. To prove my point, here's an example. Carmen as a musical, when it was released, was considered outrageous and shocking and controversial, unsurprising given that it was 1875, because the very idea that a piece of creative work could have at its very centre a woman who was perceived to be openly seductive and of questionable morality was, safe to say, beyond the sensibilities of the bourgeois audience. That was the standard demographic for Parisian opera houses at the time. After its release, it actually wasn't that successful, and its author, Georges Bizet, would be long dead before it truly exploded in popularity. Mata Ora is a kind of modern retelling of this story, and in my opinion, it is done so beautifully. What I love about this song and this performance is that it captures so much of the drama of the original, partly through the music itself and partly through the staging. The performance is shot in black and white and in a square aspect ratio. Incidentally, Sergio Hyen used the same aspect ratio when shooting Doomsday Blue for Ireland and Bambi Thug in 2024. And as well as that, the performance is all in one shot. That is to say, no cuts, no audience footage to fill in the gaps while the scene changes. I have rarely seen a staging more fitting to a song than this. In the first verse, there is a clear stylistic and rhythmic reference to the habanera that I played you just a minute ago. Simultaneously, we touch on the themes of the first act of Carmen through the staging. Just as Carmen was the object of so many men's desires, we see that represented here through the shadows of hands projected onto Rosalinda as she sings the line, "My bravery attracts them." At the end of the verse, we see a shadow cross her vision and her eyeline turns to follow it as she says, "I look at you and turn you to stone," followed by a piercing stare into the camera. Then the chorus hits with the words, "It's mata ora, bitch," and the stage turns deep red as she describes herself as sinful and as someone whose name nobody dares utter. Fast forward to the bridge, and as she sings of not staying with someone out of pity, we pan to a shadow cast on the wall behind her, of her singing to a man whose hand is ripped away to the line, "Nobody can tie me down." As it builds and builds, we reach a kind of climax moment that is so powerful. The camera rises up above her and she looks up into it defiantly, repeating the line, "They grab me tight by the hair and I cut my braids," 3 times as it rises. By the way, this photo depicts how they did that camera shot, and I think it's genius. We then go to one final chorus, this time with the final line speaking of the dagger in her chest and her death, mirroring what Carmen's ultimate fate in the opera was too. What interests me is that as she sings this line, she isn't alone. The silhouettes of 4 women are visible behind her. This is a song that, sure, it retells the story of Carmen, but it's blended with modern elements and signals that make it appeal equally well as a song about women's resistance and empowerment. We've seen some really beautiful examples of songs on this subject matter recently, and if you haven't heard it already, one I really want to highlight here is actually from Portugal last year, which was Diana Vilarinho with the song Cotovia. Once you're done here, you should definitely watch that and get the translation of the lyrics up alongside it. It makes it so powerful. Back onto the focus of this. While Rosalinda's Mata Ora is a retelling of the story of Carmen, what's really jumping out to me about this performance and about this character is the theme of revenge and resistance. The original character might be perceived as in some way immoral, but she was also a woman for whom respect was a non-negotiable. Given that we live in a world where women demanding respect is often seen as in some way bossy or pushy or whatever else, this feels like a particularly relevant theme and example to be telling right now. This whole performance was completely spellbinding, and the staging of it in particular was world class. This was my favourite song before the shows, but after this there was a considerable distance between this and everyone else for me. Everyone involved in this production should be really proud of this masterpiece. No more than Rosalinda herself, who played this character to perfection and delivered vocally on the night as well. Sometimes everything goes right, and the best thing to do is just to appreciate it. We're going to move on to the next one, which came second overall, but actually won with the juries. That was Asha with her song Turista. This is an unusual setting for a love song of any description. This entire performance takes place inside public transport, presumably a tram or bus based on the layout that will henceforth be referred to as the Touristomobile. This does naturally not hold the same depth that Mata Ora does, at least when it comes to its subject matter. This is a fairly straightforward pop song that, in studio, didn't appeal to me all that much. But once again, we have a massively elevating live performance. Despite the fact this is a song about heartache, it's actually a kind of cozy vibe. That coziness transfers to Asha's Touristomobile, where the performance takes place. It's bright yellow, and her dancers are equally dressed in bright colours. As a result, this has a real pop to it visually. We get some nice effects as well to give the impression of movement, with the lights outside moving backwards along the carriage, and most ingeniously, at one point where she puts her head out the window, someone clearly points a wind machine at her. I'm glad we got a nod to the fact that this is a live on-stage performance as well at the end, because Asha exits the bus to reveal that the crowd has been behind it watching all along. Again, what I'm appreciating here is the level of care that has been put into these performances. It's those little details like the wind machine turning on when she sticks her head out the window that shows that this is something that has been worried about and thought through from start to finish. I talked about this in the context of Kautkaili in Latvia a couple of weeks ago, and it just makes such a difference to my enjoyment of a show. It makes these performances feel rich and meaningful, even if they're songs that initially I didn't enjoy so much. It was a consistent theme actually through pretty much every single song that we had in this entire show, that when I watched the live performance, which sadly there are far more of than I can spotlight here today, every time I thought, wow, I like this so much more than when I listened to the studio versions. It just goes to show when you have a team that really gives everything, that clearly deeply cares about the art that they're making, you can produce something beautiful. Coming back around to Turista, we should also say that once again the vocal is very good. And while there's not a huge amount to this song overall, there's no need to overthink it. What it does have, it makes the most of. This is a perfect example of matching something to the exact right environment. She's reflecting on a lost romance in a kind of ponderous, circular way that you might do with your head leaning on the window on a bus or a tram. It was never going to be my favorite song, but in this context, it really came together. And she was rewarded with that first place in the jury and second overall. The winner of this show, though, was Tony Crocs and Lucy Callis with their song Tamare. Tony Grox is a producer and DJ. The Grox are the supervillains from the 2008 video game Spore. These two things are probably not related. Lucy Callis is a fairly new artist with 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and no songs over 15,000 streams on Spotify, except for this one, which as of now has 1.1 million. While Turista was a song about a breakup, this is a song about being very in love. Once again, there's no deep analysis of the lyrics that needs to be done here, and no secret social or political message. Lucia just really loves whoever it is she's singing to in this song. And it's not a surprise to see that she's done this with Tony because he has produced some of her other work as well. This is a bit of an interesting one for me. On a purely impartial level, as hard as that might be to believe when it's me talking, I understand why this one, and that it has a lot of relevance to modern Spanish music. I can see the scenarios where you'd listen to this in the car, on the beach at sunset, that kind of thing. It's also arriving at the perfect time with spring just around the corner and summer following it. I appreciate how slick the performance is as well, how natural and relaxed the vocal is, and the fact that it doesn't overcomplicate things and lets these qualities speak for themselves. That said, something is just not quite clicking for me here. It's not that I don't like it, because it's nicely done and I do enjoy it. Once again, it was a big upgrade from the studio version to the live. I just feel there's a slight level of immersion missing for me, and I've been trying to put my finger on what that is. I think it might just be, having seen the impossibly high standards set by the high drama of Rosalinda and the beautifully constructed vibes of Asha, I wanted to maybe see something that met or exceeded that on a staging front. This could equally just be me overthinking it, and it could be that actually overstaging this would be equally big a risk. Its appeal, after all, is in its accessibility. The fact that it's easily the catchiest song here, I can hear it in my head right now, and its danceability. And to be fair, as I said, I could immediately visualize where I would listen to it. I guess I'm trying to separate and draw a distinction between what I want to see from the perspective of an international fan, and as someone who's used to these things competing in a Eurovision or similar context, versus what Spanish people are looking for from what is a domestic competition now that is an end in and of itself. I have to say though that I think this says something wider about the show this year. It's almost like the jury chose the songs on some level knowing that Spain wouldn't end up sending any of them to Eurovision. And as a result, it feels like that wasn't even a consideration when that process was ongoing. Sure, there are some great potential candidates for this selection if it was going to Eurovision, and all of the top three probably would have at least made their way to mid-table, but that's kind of a footnote. What this selection does have, and what has to be its mission going forward, at least for now, is a broad and faithful representation of the kinds of music that are most popular in Spain right now. From the broadcaster's point of view, that is a big and important shift. RTVE were tasked with creating a show that would stand on its own without Eurovision being needed to justify its its existence. From the perspective of being a faithful and high-quality representation of the music industry in Spain, in my opinion, we have a clear success. Where things are maybe not so positive for now is the continued relevance of the show to the public. There were some warning signs in the viewing figures here, with the final viewership falling from 1.9 million last year to 1.1 million this year. As well as that, the semi-finals went under the 1 million mark. I don't think this is necessarily a fatal blow or disaster, though, to be honest, because, to be real, everybody knew that viewership would fall in the first year after they left Eurovision. The reality is, for lots of people, that was the only reason to watch it. The positive to take here is that it still won its primetime slot, which is something that public broadcasters don't necessarily find very easy to do, and created something of serious value for the participants beyond the 100,000 euros that got given to the winners. It shone a spotlight on and provided some amazing stagings and performances for a series of artists who got the kind of break and a moment in the public eye that is so hard to find. In our video last week on Estonia, we talked about precisely these personal and professional motivations and why Eurovision matters as a platform for people to elevate their careers to the next level. We have just seen how much potential BenidormFest has to serve exactly that purpose and to provide that opportunity on a domestic level. And Spain's market is large enough to support that within the confines of one country in a way that simply isn't the case in a lot of other places. I really hope that by producing such an excellent show, demand both from the public side and the artist side will increase next year. There is a prize more important than winning here, and that's the fact that you'll be made to look really, really good while singing your song, no matter where you finish. Even Kenneth, who came last in the final, sounded and looked great. There are so many questions and uncertainties over what the future will be, both for Spain in the context of Eurovision and for BenidormFest. This year was one of transition, and BenidormFest hit the marks, in my opinion, that it needed to. It proved its relevance, it held onto a good audience share, and delivered a high-quality show in every respect. That said, I'm not sure I feel fully equipped to assess this totally. To do that, I think we need an expert. Luckily, I've brought one in to help us.
I'm Miguel Eras and I'm a content creator from Spain. I've been covering the Eurovision Song Contest for the past 7 years or so in different projects that I've been part of. But this year, after the events that have happened in the past few editions of the Eurovision Song Contest, I decided just to focus on BenidormFest. BenidormFest, which if we look back on the past 4 editions, was really focused on Eurovision. But this year, RTBE really understood that they needed to rebrand it as something else, something bigger than a national final. That's not something easy when you try to rebrand something that is very attached to Eurovision into something else. And I think they took steps in the right direction, having different trophies like the Spotify or the Univision, also improving the quality of the show, having national legends like Alaska or Luz Casal being interval acts, and also reflecting on the past of BenidormFest, the biggest hits that we saw in the interval acts, having Channel as well, I think having Melody as a Super Bowl opening for the final. I think they took steps in the right direction, as I said before, but they know they need to do something else for the contest to survive. They need to cater it to a wider audience. They cannot only focus on the Univision fans for them to get the viewership. But we have to be honest, the viewership this year wasn't great. We still did like 1 million viewers, but it was lower than the other years. And I think it's like, this is the ground floor for it. And from now, they have to build it. And I think they need to be riskier and wilder in their choices in order for people to be engaged in BenidormFest. I don't think that you need to have like a controversy, but they need to be something that hook the people into watching the contest. As I told you before, it's not easy to rebrand something that was really attached to the Eurovision Song Contest into something that is bigger than that. Why? Because people really think of BenidormFest as a national final for Eurovision, and they need to let loose of that. And that's RTB's biggest problem for BenidormFest to have a future. But they are working on it. And they are obliged to it because, let's be honest, if they want to have BenidormFest, but Israel is still participating in the Eurovision Song Contest, I don't think we are coming back anytime soon unless there is a political change in our government. José Pablo López, RTBE president, has been very vocal about Israel's participation on Eurovision Song Contest and how the changes really didn't like seem enough for our broadcasters to still participating in the event. So the future of BenidormFest really depends on becoming something bigger than a national final. And I think they have the ingredients to make BenidormFest something great, but they need something very, very important, which is time. And you know that in television, time isn't really gifted to anyone. And I think they have the right ingredients for it. Not only because RTV is interested on the success of BenidormFest, also the local governments are interested on it. Because if we take a look into the past, when BenidormFest was El Festival de Benidorm, nobody really seemed to take care of the success of the contest. And I think right now that we are in a very different spot. Looking forward to 2027, which is confirmed that it's gonna happen. Jose Pablo Lopez, RTVE president, confirmed that BenidormFest 2027 is gonna happen. Don't worry about it. Quick thoughts about BenidormFest this year. First, Sergio Jaén really showed again why he is a genius. Matt Ahora's staging was impressive, at least. The second thought is that not having Eurovision linked made people vote what they really wanted, not thinking about what's gonna be competitive in a later stage. And the third one is like people really voted for the song that was more catered to the taste of the Spanish viewer, because they voted Te Amaré, which is a feel-good, carefree song that really showed Spanish roots in a very different light than, for example, Ea Ea was. Think about it in this way. When you think of Spain, you think of happy and cheerful. But when we go to our roots in Eurovision, we mostly do it in an intense and passionate way. Thanks so much for having me. I hope that you enjoy BenidormFest 2026. See you next year.
Thank you so much to Miguel for agreeing to be part of this video, and you can find his channel in the description, so make sure to check it out. Overall then, what we have is a year of transition. A lot of challenges still to come for this show, especially if, as Miguel suggests, it may be a few years in the Eurovision wilderness before Spain returns to the contest. What we do have, at least, is hope that this show can stick it out as a standalone format. And that's a model that every country could copy and learn from one day. For now, it's time to wrap it up for today. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, as we are on our way to Finland and to Sweden next. And it would be fantastic if you could join me there by subscribing. For now, thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you very soon.